Afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on your time zone. Welcome back to our closing plenary of this 2024 Biennial Symposium, The Natural World, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Law. It has been an extremely enriching day, filled with highly distinguished experts, brilliant scholars, and many extremely impressive practitioners, as well as active engagement and learning from hundreds of sustainability leaders who have kindly joined us online. I know that many more of you are watching these videos and are informing yourselves through the work that has been done by these scholars and leaders over the last 2 years. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by the chair of the CISDL Board of Governors, Dr. Ashfaq Khalfan, for this final closing plenary. Dr. Khalfan.
Thank you, Mary Claire. It's been an amazing day. So we have the chairs of our plenaries who have joined us to reflect on and synthesize the knowledge that's been shared throughout today. And so what's going to guide our closing discussion are two questions. One, how can international law promote a more sustainable natural world? And question two, what are the emerging trends, the most innovative instruments, and the most promising developments in international law and policy to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
So I think in terms of how international law can promote a more sustainable world, particularly with respect to protecting and restoring nature, I might turn to one of the leading speakers from our climate change session, who has kindly joined us because the other chair was unable to be with us this evening. And I would like to hear from you, and then I will also turn to Professor Markus Gehring, who was part of the Trade and Biodiversity panel. I wonder if, Zenaida, you might have a couple of thoughts on links between human rights and climate change, and Ashfaq, you're welcome to jump in, and then Markus as well on trade and biodiversity and natural resources.
Thank you so much, Mary Claire. Well, it was an amazing first plenary where we had the global experts linking human rights and climate change through international law, Sustainable Development Goals 1, 5, 10, and 13. And I think I would just sum up what was highlighted by our keynote speakers, Ambassador Decima Williams. And she basically said that the SDGs anchor our commitments and help us link human rights and climate change through international law. She stressed that we need to make much more progress and insist on their implementation. And the second keynote, Justice Jawad Hassan then spoke about the need to explore which court has to handle climate litigation and how climate justice in all countries can truly be delivered. I hope that succinctly sums up how international law can sustain the modern world.
Excellent, thank you. And Dr. Gehring?
Thank you very much. We had a very rich discussion in our Global Experts Plenary 2 on governing trade, investment, natural resources, and bioeconomy development. And what our keynote and speakers and interveners stressed was that we cannot address some of the most pressing biodiversity challenges without taking trade and investment seriously. And at the same time, trade and investment need to be much more respectful to the natural world, to the bioeconomy. One of our speakers highlighted that especially Dr. Lorena from UNCTAD highlighted that what we don't count we sometimes don't value. So the first step would be to find out how biodiversity trade is developing, and then to adopt legal innovations to address the biodiversity crisis, also in trade and investment. That can be done through treaty change, and we heard from Professor Gleason that it's sometimes difficult to change the treaty regime, but it is possible. We also heard that new innovative provisions that, for example, integrate the new UNCBD global biodiversity framework into trade considerations are being considered and being adopted, not just at the bilateral level, but also increasingly these discussions are reaching the World Trade Organization, as we heard from Dr. Ali Khan Lim and our keynote, Dr. Spuspati. It was a rich discussion. We had many, many questions from the audience. Certainly, how to accommodate the Sustainable Development Goals, trade, investment, and how to safeguard the natural world is a continuing discussion and requires much more research by all of us. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire.
How strange that an academic would recommend much more research. But yes, I wonder if in terms of this first question, Neshan, Maya, Ashfaq, would you have any further insights you'd like to add?
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I mean, I agree with all the speakers. It was an incredibly rich conversation. It was quite a blessing in the session that I had the pleasure of co-chairing with Professor Maya Prabhu on restoring indigenous rights and health. And it's kind of the value, the intergenerational knowledge and the sciences that indigenous people bring, but obviously clearly and powerfully put across by Advocate Wayne Garner Williams. And I think that's really set the tone for the discussion which was to flow. And to see kind of the momentum shift that the kind of the Maori engagement in Aotearoa, New Zealand is bringing to the international law discourse, and how it's influencing the work in Canada, especially with regard to indigenous knowledge system and trade and economy. One striking point, and here I want to bring some wisdom from Judge Veeramantri that he left, was that the Article 9 of the International Court of Justice statute speaks about the judges of the ICJ or these tribunals are supposed to be representing not only their national jurisdiction or one civil law, common law legal system, but they're representing and custodians of all legal systems on the planet. And here I think the indigenous system, the intergenerational equity which was highlighted, was an absolute key shift on how international law is being discussed for the 21st century. And I think this is a rich discussion, and I'm glad that it's been recorded and we're going to view this as we go on. And one final kind of point from that discussion was our link with systems knowledge, whether it's the water systems knowledge, whether it's energy, the food systems, and as well as energy, that we need to drive in the principles of indigenous knowledge within international law and broadly interpret this within not only academia, but in our litigation and academic engagements as well. So I will leave it at that. I'm sure there are others who also want to comment. I see Maya has also joined.
Hi, sorry about that, everyone. And wonderful to see all of you. Thank you for always your incisive comments summarizing complex dialogues that took place over the course of the day. Maybe I'll just add one point to the plenary that Neshan and I co-chaired, was that even as we begin to think about both indigenous examples, systems, local knowledge being incorporated into international frameworks and discussions and to stakeholders. The larger context, of course, is climate change, which is also amplifying these concerns about scarce resources. And also, I think, if I can put it this way, the framework of sovereignty, changing porous borders, both driven by climate change and other structural changes, will also hasten the need to think about a more integrated pathways for negotiation and laws. So I'll throw that into the mix.
Very fair. And I think that in a way, what we're talking about is a progressive development of international law. And that is a commitment that is understandable, with millions more people graduating every year at all levels, including from primary school educations, and having views about how society can organize itself globally, as well as the multi-level embedded citizenships of which we are all part, global to local to even tiny family groups, all of which is governed by norms as well as, dare we say, law. So I think what we'll do is we will move to our second question, because we had so many recent judgments, recent treaty instruments, recent governance arrangements, recent practices, and calls for even further development of international law in this area, and that which surrounds it and motivates it, the policy, including the UN Sustainable Development Goals itself. So I will come around to all three of our panelists, and we have also given the right to talk to our colleagues who joined us either as program coordinators or as leaders of different panels or as keynotes, so that you can jump in, if you wish, with a few additional ideas before we close this extremely rich symposium. So in terms of the emerging trends, most innovative instruments, and most promising developments in international law and policy to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly as they pertain to the natural world, I'm going to start first with our climate change and human rights panel. So I've got, I'm putting, Ashfaq, I'm putting you on the spot as one of the chairs, and I'll ask Ashfaq and Zunaida to comment. And if either Maeve or Bill Shipley, both of whom are program coordinators, would like to add any particular inspiring instruments or policies that they have seen, they are online and they are very welcome to do so. But Ashfaq and Zunaida, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean the standout is really the use of advisor opinions, and I think I'm not saying very much new there, but the promise there, the ability to deal with challenges that are very difficult to deal with in the traditional contentious proceedings. It's as if advisor opinions were designed for climate change, right? Because of the impacts, the multifaceted impacts on one country affecting all. And the striking, Zunaida talked about the Klima Senioren case, and just striking how the court, a very conservative court, completely rejected the argument that, well, the emissions of Switzerland are tiny in comparison, and that somehow, even though Switzerland isn't being held to account for its extraterritorial obligations, it is still being asked to do its share for its own people. I mean, that was pretty striking and surprising to an extent. Zunaida, how would you add in terms of?
I was hoping we'd have one innovation from the human rights realm and one from the climate regime. Zenaida, or am I asking too much?
No, I think actually there's more than one, because every speaker, I think I've managed to just summarize one that answers those questions. So very briefly, or as briefly as I possibly can go. From Professor Richard Walsgrove, he pointed out that simplifying climate law and the need to explore the co-benefits from greenhouse gas reductions on diverse SDGs such as food, agriculture, and health also stood out. And then Professor Chinthi, she warned that disregarding SDGs and climate justice will be detrimental to achieving climate objectives and the other SDGs, and I think we all could pay heed to that. And then over to Professor James May, who highlighted the climate litigation in the USA and the disappointment with the Juliana case. And then Advocate Lara then commending the greening of human rights, as has been seen recently with the special rapporteurs, and then just my own point, which Ashfaq had brilliantly summarized. So I think that hopefully answers that second question.
Okay, but I'm going to push you a little bit, and I'm going to say that the adoption in the opening plenary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, CMA, when we agreed before it became a political punching ball to take the response fund on loss and damage forward, was perhaps one of the other innovations that we've just seen. I would be betraying my friendship with Christina without also underlining the Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee that has now started to release some of its first decisions, and we're seeing some of those changes there. So I'm piling it on in the climate change realm, but you're right that on the panel there were some incredible ideas brought forward at the local as well as international level. I'm turning now to our second plenary, and Markus is here, and I will also note that Ilaria Colombo, who's one of our program coordinators in natural resources, is online and has permission to speak. So Ilaria, if you have other things you'd like to add, please just signal and you're welcome to jump in. But Markus, maybe just two innovations, since your co-chairs have abandoned you. And unmute, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marie-Claire. We heard that discussions about innovations, especially with regards to trade and investment, are actually now occurring at all levels. We've heard about greater alignment between the NDCs and international trade commitments, direct references to the Paris Agreement as essential elements. Also on the other side, so NDCs that are integrating trade as a tool to achieving the very ambitious climate goals and net zero, but also taking, especially Ted talked very succinctly about the many innovations that are needed in the investment law regime. So perhaps starting to exclude the protection of fossil fuel investments, starting to revise some of the common assumptions about investor-state dispute settlement, and strengthening domestic legal regimes that have to do with trade, and in a way that also links us with the second plenary to the third plenary, because there we heard many more innovations with regards to indigenous trade, and that is certainly a fantastic way of aligning the Sustainable Development Goals with trade and investment. We didn't highlight Athena's treaties in the session itself, but we heard from Professor Damilola that sustainability assessments, human rights assessments are essential for investment decisions, for trade decisions, and to advance those kind of agreements. And I think that summarizes quite accurately where we are with regards to the natural world and trade and investment.
Yeah, and for those who don't spend all their time as trade geeks. What we did in that book, Athena's Treaties, is that we essentially looked at the Greek god of trade is Hermes, god of trade and thieves, actually. And so we tried to reconceive of trade laws, though it would actually support sustainable development, picking Athena as our potential goddess for sustainable development had the term existed, given that she gave an olive tree to Athens to win the city. And it looked through and linked provisions that have been adopted in bilateral, regional, other trade agreements with the sustainable development goals, sort of as almost an index of options for governments who were seeking to go a little bit beyond the usual. But far beyond the usual, of course, is the indigenous trade and economic cooperation agreement that Wayne highlighted. And I don't want to put him on the spot. He has the ability to speak if he wishes on exactly that instrument. But my goodness, is it ever an exciting one? Wayne? I'm a bit worried that he's unmuted, but for some reason the panel it doesn't allow him to speak. So I'm going to let us sort that out just in case. And in the meantime, I'll also highlight that Mateus Garcia, who's one of the program coordinators of our trade program, is also online. And if you'd like to speak, you have the ability to sort of signal, put your hand up. We've given that to you. So then I'm going to turn to our third plenary, Maya and Neshan. What emerging trends and innovative instruments and promising developments did your plenary come forward with?
Well, I'll start, and Neshan will then correct me. I think there is more hope to be found about domestic litigation using language and precedents from international treaties and aspirations. I think all of our panelists were able to identify domestic successes, particularly around the issue of intergenerational equity and intergenerational equity. What do you think, Neshan?
I agree with you, Maya. Yes, I think the small is beautiful was coming out from the whole group. I think the specific evolution of principles of stewardship of resources going into the co-governance modalities with the Maori. I think that influences, I think it was interesting to see kind of, the international tribunals and advisory opinions being cited in domestic courts. I think that's a real shift from possibly the 20th century of international law to the 21st century of international law. I think we've seen the domestic courts influencing international tribunals, but we see a traffic flowing in the other direction, which is great for international law and sustainable development goals. And one thing that Professor Damilola highlighted, which I also picked up, was kind of evolution of rights coming from indigenous knowledge system, rights of future generations. These principles, which is imbued within customary norms of or customary principles of international law. He referred to the UNESCO Declaration of 1997 of duties of current generations toward future generations, which kind of seeped into an evolution of principles of rights of future generations, which is kind of an exciting body of evolution of law, both responsibilities but also rights.
Absolutely, and actually, I mean, the book that Professor Judge Sabo held up does go into those national authorities and the network that they formed in order to collaborate with each other to help each other, because they're often in a very awkward position of telling parliaments or even legislators or even judges that they're not taking into account the rights of future generations, the needs of future generations in a balanced way. And our society itself is being taught, of course, to think by quarter, not even by 4-year mandate, let alone by generation, let alone by 7 generations. So there's a real challenge there. I can see that we've probably resolved the technical difficulties, and I wanted to give the last word to Wayne because he brought forward as a keynote the one of the most innovative and interesting international legal instruments of our century, which is of course IPETCA.
I hope we can be. Can you hear me? All right. Super. Yeah, I just thank you so much for this wonderful day. I really enjoyed the speakers that I got to work with. The interveners were awesome. The conversation was dynamic, and it felt like I was either at a dinner party or a coffee house with some cool people, and that would made it just a great dynamic. So thank you. And just to summarize, just to recap some of the key things there. IPECTA is so revolutionary, and it needs to have just some creative play where we can see what we can do with it. What kind of mileage can we get out of it? How far can we stretch this? I'm looking forward to experimenting with how we can apply this in various contexts in practical application. Like, for example, the fact that, as I mentioned, the IPECTA is an arrangement where it's environmental stewardship that respects the Sustainable Development Goals, but also has an economic aspect to it, which is kind of part and parcel where we should be going, which is really cool. So that they're tied. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are tied with the IPECTA, and the evidence of that is shown in the definition of indigenous trade. I'll just mention one, and that's subsection 4 again: to protect land, resources, and spiritual interrelationship of human and natural world, as well as integrity of the natural systems themselves. That's the definition of indigenous trade. And then you look at the core aspects, the fact that there's the lens of the whole IPECTA is seen through environmental protection, through Article 3 sub E, which lists all of the internationally respected treaties dealing with the environment. That's the lens that we see this through. And that's the great promise, is the fact that we'll move forward in business, but respect the agreements we've already done. And finally, of course, the fact that this is such a key point, the fact that indigenous people comprise less than 5% of the world's population, but protect 80% of the biodiversity. That's why this is so important. That's why the rest of the world needs to listen to this, because we have something to offer, which can be a new way of doing things to keep sustainable development alive. Thanks.
Yeah. And that biodiversity, which I was referring to in opening the Gontier lectures and Weirmantree International Justice Awards earlier today, is in crisis. It's in serious crisis. So listening to indigenous peoples is to a certain extent often listening to a voice for the voiceless, for the millions of other species. 8.7 million, according to some of the estimates I was looking at in preparation for this symposium. And 41,000 species that are threatened with extinction. Like, that's not 41,000 animals, which would be enough. That's 41,000 entire species. And I still remember teaching at Yale University environmental law a couple of decades ago now, and having that conversation with my colleagues about what was nicknamed the God Squad, that was allowed to decide to make extinct an entire species, and the senior leaders who had been given the power to sign off on that wouldn't do it in almost all of the cases. And then I think about a civilization or myriad multi-layered civilizations that are so poorly organized that there's no one signing at all, and this might be happening and will be happening and is happening. And it sounds like we need a few people who are able to do the opposite than signing, who are able to stop that behavior, because there will be so much that we will lose if we lose that diversity, if we lose those ecosystems, if we lose those systems that we depend on, communities, livelihoods, cultures, our entire civilization. So I agree with you, Wayne, is what I'm really saying. So I'm going to just check, are there other questions online? Because we've been given a strict mandate to try to end this symposium on time. And yet we would love to bring in our colleagues if they wish. Last comments from any of our colleagues. If not, I'm going to turn over to my co-chair and of course the chair of our board to help us conclude this symposium with a word from two very, very special law journal partners. Seeing none and understanding that people may be a bit tired, I'm going to turn back to Dr. Khalfan. Ashfaq.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think my last comment was just there was a really good point that Richard made about co-benefits, and he made a very strong policy argument. I think if we probably needed to extend it more into the legal sphere, and there's something there for us to really think about, and in terms of how multiple objectives can be met through a particular intervention. So not just talking about the money you save, but yeah, so that it just seems there's something very, very powerful that we need to grasp onto and work with in our future discussions. Now, just want to check that, are we going to give a word to the journal? I don't know if...
Yes, I think we have two colleagues who are online from two journals this time round, which I'm very, very, very pleased that we're able to welcome our colleagues from Nigeria, from the other journal on sustainable development law and policy. I don't know if you want to turn to our Nigerian international colleagues first, and then ask the Yale journal to close up. So I think it would be Dr. Egoza Ekator. Are you muted? Shall we unmute you? Perfect. We can see you and hear you, sir.
Okay. Hello, good evening. My name is Egoza Ekator. I'm an associate professor of international environmental law at the University of Derby. So I'm very pleased to have attended this event, and as someone who does a lot of stuff on SDGs and environmental law, which is quite useful for me. So, but in this capacity, I'm representing the Journal of Sustainable Development Law and Policy. It's just to provide a bit of what we do as a journal. I'm the deputy editor-in-chief of the journal. Professor Damilola is the editor-in-chief. It's a scholarly, peer-reviewed, interdisciplinary journal published by the Institute of Oil, Gas, Energy, Environment, and Sustainable Development, Afe Babalola University, Ado-Ekiti in Nigeria. It was established in 2013 by the founder of the Abuad, Afe Babalola Hassan himself. The journal is published twice a year, June and October, and by the Afe Babalola University Press. The journal focuses on the dissemination of research results and scholarly outputs by teaching and research scholars in Africa and across the world in the area of sustainable development law and policy. And this is very, very important for someone, even though I'm a Nigerian based in the UK, there's absence of sustainable development focused scholarship, even focused on Africa. So our journal tries to mitigate that gap. And last year, we became the first Nigerian law journal that has been indexed by Scopus as well. So we're indexed by Scopus. We have a very sort of like reputable, international, respected editorial board. And Professor Olaoye, everybody knows Olaoye is the editor-in-chief. So in our only two ways, we try to contribute to the scholarship and teaching of sustainable development in Africa and across Africa. We've done some special issues on MNCs and SDGs, which I was involved with. We've done a couple of special issues, etc. And also in terms of the symposium itself, I think for someone who's focused on SDGs from an African perspective, it also shows the linkage between what we've done, you guys have done throughout this symposium as well. You could see the linkages in terms of the advisory. I was really interested in the last, what Professor Claire was saying regarding the judgment in in Canada, and I just had a look at the judgment in terms of the treaties, etc. We could also see some similar situations on the African continent in terms of the old treaties signed by the various colonial regimes in Africa. Are there any implications for sustainable development? And I think from my own perspective, I think what this symposium has done is very, very good. The only thing I'll probably say is that I think there's a very few sort of African sort of contribution in this symposium. I think there's a need to engage with a lot of African-based scholars and African scholars to actually bring that African perspective, especially with these issues around the advisory opinion. I know the African Union is doing stuff around that. The the first climate change case in Africa in the world was in Nigeria, the Gehring case. I think there's a lot we can also contribute going forward, and I think I'm very grateful for the opportunity as well. So I'll pass on to Samuel to continue. Hopefully, the journal will collaborate with the symposium going forward in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel?
Well, thanks for the invitation today. Yeah, myself, my colleague Ben is here as well. And on behalf of the entire journal, we're very proud to be affiliated with the CISDL, and we're excited to be here today. I recently took over at the helm of the journal as editor-in-chief, so I'm excited to get started and continue the good work we do. I know this work is very important, so we're honored to be a part of it and to be a part of this event. A quick kind of background on the journal. So we're a student-run, peer-reviewed academic journal. We're based in McGill in Montreal at McGill University. We were founded in 2004. Last year, we celebrated our 20th anniversary. We are very shortly going to be opening submissions for the upcoming year. So anybody who is interested, please reach out to us with submissions or with questions. We encourage submissions from researchers, professors, practitioners, policymakers, students in a wide range of fields related to sustainable development. Our publication is rooted in Montreal, but firmly international. We publish on international law issues as well as domestic legal issues from countries around the world related to sustainable development. Before we close out, I'll just quickly say, I think I'm the last person to speak today, so I will just quickly say that events like this symposium, I know the audience here today is extremely, from around the world. So this is very important to have these kinds of events to connect people working in this space and to kind of, I guess, foster that solidarity between academics in this space all around the world. So very, very happy, honored to be here. And McGill Journal of Sustainable Development Law, we're proud to be affiliated with the CISDL, and go check us out, see what we've published recently. And we have quite a few publications almost ready to be published in the next couple months. So follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, and there's some interesting work to be published soon.
Thank you very much, Samuel, and thank you very much, Professor Dr. Egosa. It is an honor to be affiliated with you, and we deeply support and value the scholarship that you are inspiring, gathering, compiling, editing, and disseminating, spreading around the world, raising awareness and knowledge and understanding. It's incredibly valuable in our field, and we honor it. I think with that, I would be very, very happy to simply say a word of thanks, not just to your two journals that are partners in these international symposia endeavors, but also to our partners from McGill University, the University of Montreal, the University of Cambridge, the University of Costa Rica, Yale University, HBKU, Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar, the Swiss Italian University, and many other distinguished academic institutes that are with us in this work. I'd also like to thank the renowned experts and colleagues from the United Nations Environment Programme, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the International Law Association, the International Intertribal Trade and Investment Organization, and the 60 Scoop Healing Foundation, as well as the Net Zero Lawyers Alliance, and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, among many other institutions that have joined us here online today and that have also assisted in the outreach that led to such a broad circle from so many countries being present with us in different sessions throughout the day, and indeed those who are assisting us and participating in our online education and engagement activities in our Democratizing Education for Global Sustainability and Justice initiative that we lead together with the CISDL and the University of Cambridge and many other partners. So it has been a rich and inspiring and interesting debate and set of discussions. We have had a chance to share many ideas. We are ending on a positive note with some of the emerging trends and innovations and signs of change in our field. We know, of course, that the challenge in front of us is immense. We know, of course, that the times are desperate. We know, of course, that we can only choose to do what we do and to change what we can change. But that has to be enough, you know, and that is exactly what everyone here has committed to. Law, policy, governance is our area in which we can make that change. And so we're making the commitment to do so. And I'd like to thank especially my co-chair, Elizabeth Mrema, who joined me for most of the day, and the co-chair of the final session, whose job it is to declare this symposium closed, for their support and encouragement and engagement. And I'd like to also finally congratulate and celebrate the winners of the 2024, the laureates of the 2024 Weir-Mantry International Justice Awards, who joined us today, Professor Jim Bacchus, and of course, Professor Damilola Olawuyi and Judge Kathy Ann Brown. I would also like to celebrate and honor the two Gonche lecturers, Judge Kathy Ann Brown and Professor Christina Voigt, who gave incredibly inspiring addresses. And I would like to especially honor and thank our three winners of the Global Fellowship Award, which was inaugurated today, Eshan, Godwin, and Smriti. And we are looking forward to working with them in the 2-year mandate to come. So with that, I will turn over to Dr. Khalfan, to Ashfaq, my old friend, to help us close this inspiring event.
Thank you. We'll conclude on time. And just really, I mean, it's been inspiring and useful to listen to all of the contributions today. And I hope that many of you will find some way to adjust or you know, inject some of what you've learned in your future work, and to build on the connections you've made today. The one thing I will do that Mary Claire and can't is to really just thank the organizers, the people who put in hours and hours of chasing speakers, designing the program, designing the way it should go, dealing with technical issues. Thank you all. This wouldn't happen without the work from those of you, including people in the background, who we of course know from your emails. So thank you so much. It's really, really you know, the backbone. So thank you for that.
Yeah, especially Tejas, Gwyneth, and Chris, who are making us proud as University of Cambridge and McGill law and graduate students, and also all of the moderators, the online moderators who came from all over the world and just fitted themselves in seamlessly. You know, I'm going to channel my inner Lara and you know, teammate makes the dream work kind of thing, or whatever it is. Teamwork makes the dream work. But they really have been an incredible team, and marvelous to see the work that they're doing, and a privilege to work with, a true honor to work with.
And with that note, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.